Зациклился, я слышу, как я рофлю на стриме.
Ну тогда. Поехали.
Ты в лайфе как-то цветкорил, возможно.
Yeah.
Отстой. Мне кажется, тебе надо уж приветствовать, а то это совсем долго.
Hi everybody. I'm hoping I am live now. Can we somehow check it out?
Let me try. And
I see we're going live. So hi everybody, this is another stream about our library Taiga UI. In the last stream we spoke about customization and how we can change component appearance to our needs. And that was in 2.2 release. Yesterday we released the 2.6 version that comes with a big update, a new table component, and we would take a look at that. But first, let's just make a quick overview of what we have released since our last stream. And you see we have a change log on our demo portal. It's in the documentation section, change log, where you can see all the things that we have added and bugs that we fixed. And in version 2.3 that was released soon after the last stream, we added theme night, and I believe it was covered on the stream. So let's move up to the 2.4 version, which was released earlier this month. And in that we've added SAS mixin support. It was a community contribution actually, and a lot of people were asking why are we using less and not SCSS. And to be honest, it was just a choice at the time. And since it's an internal implementation, it doesn't really matter. If you want to use global styles, you can just import them in Angular JSON, and Angular will take care of all the various preprocessors that you have, so we can mix less and SAS. But there are some mixins that you might want to use in your applications, so we just mirrored those in SCSS version, so we can use them as well. And there are some other community contributions. We added a German translation and Spanish for all the library. And there are some fixes that you can see here. Then we released version 2.5, which added some new custom properties, CSS variables for fonts that you could change depending on the size that you want your texts look. And this is a part of the effort to bring more customization to Taiga, which we plan to continue going forward. We would add more customization through DI tokens and stuff like that, which is also, you can see here. We've added customization for checkbox with DI tokens, and this is something that we would cover later, I guess. We are working on the roadmap now. We've added full customization through DI tokens there, so we could configure all default values for our components once and for all in dependency injection, and change icons as well. So this is coming later. I'll probably have another stream on that. We've also added Dutch and Turkish translation, which are also community contributions, and this really feels awesome to see people make pull requests, fix bugs, add content to our project. It's very exciting to have community welcome us so warmly. And there are also some bug fixes, and now we're getting to the 2.6 version, which is what we're going to talk about here. In that version, the Ukrainian support was added for the language, the table new model that we are going to discuss, and also edit on online IDE support for add-on documentation, so you could use it for your own demo portals. And there's a new feature added there, which is called edit on online IDE, and in our demo portal all examples have edit on stack blitz button now, so we can take a look at that when we're going to look at the tables. So let's move to components and to the newly added table here. Table and the table itself. So this is a whole new module that we added, and it has a lot of functionalities here that we would slowly walk through probably. So there are 3 examples here. The basic example, which is very basic really. The only thing here is the resize of the columns and the formatting of the number value. We will look at the source code soon. And there's a second example where you have different things inside table cells, like tags, custom content, action buttons that appear on hover, different styles here. You see borders are only vertical, and you have a zebra coloring of the background. And we also have sorters here, so we could sort by status. Say we want to see who of Monty Pythons have already ceased, unfortunately. And the third example is the biggest one, where I try to stack all the features in one. This one is a editable table, so all of these items are input elements. Now this is a select element, and this one is a calculatable column that takes the price and quantity and multiplies it, and we will see how it's done. And you see there's also multiple table bodies here, Monty Python one and Star Wars, and the header is sticky. You see when we scroll it a little bit and it becomes sticky, we see a little shadow here indicating that it's stuck. And if we make our screen a little smaller, we see that there's a horizontal sticky here as well. I think it's a little bit too small now. Let's make it like that. So we can scroll it horizontally, and we see that it gets stuck as well with the shadow, and it even works diagonally. Diagonal. It's really satisfying to scroll with a touchpad. So these are interactive. You can collapse and expand those, and there's also sorting here, and also some custom sort for our computable column for total values, and this is what you can do. So do you have any questions in chat so far? Let's take a look. Nope, the chat is clear. How many guys we have watching?
8.
8. Okay. So let's take a look at the source code of these examples. And actually, let's try a new feature, edit on stack blitz, right away. So this is a very basic one. Let's try with it first. We have a lot of modules bootstrapping in stack blitz example, so it might take a while to launch at first. So let's take a look at the code while it's starting up. We have a data, which is an array of objects with name and balance keys, and we also have an array called columns, which is an array of keys of these objects. I'm sorry. And in our HTML we have the table layout, so we are using the actual table native tag, and we have to add a directive to table to it, and this would allow us to pass columns array, which is a way for you to define what columns should go in what order here. And then we have a t head. We can remove it. It would remove the headers. Then we have a th group, which is a first row inside a header here. And we will take a look how we can make multiple rows here and merge cells later in a bigger example. Then we have a th component on a header, and there's a resizable input set to true, so the first column is resizable, and we can drag the edge of it to resize it. And there we have name for our columns here, and then we have t-body, and we pass data there, and inside of it we have a structural directive called toRow, which defines each row that we will have here, and we pass the item of data here, and our item context variable becomes strongly typed. So you see that if we try to use item balance, from this object we know that it's a number, and we can use a format number pipe here to add formatting here. So we have to add table raw to a raw directive, the structural one, and an attribute directive that would take care of all the looping over the items here for us, and create the TRs. Also, there's a structural directive for cell, which you need to pass the key of the column. This way you could define different elements, different templates for each of the item here. And as you can see, we skipped the cell for name because we don't need to process it anyhow, and we can just leave it as is, and it would be displayed as a plain interpolation. Actually, we can remove this one as well, and we would see, let's try that out. We will see that the balance value also passed as is, and if we don't need to format anything, you can do it just like that. Also, you don't have to put any of the th elements here if your keys are already formatted too, so you can just remove those and have it like that. So this is the most minimal setup that you need to display a table. You need a table itself, you need to pass a columns array, you need to have th with a single tr element if you want to show header, and you need to have tbody with our directive tbody here, and you pass the data there. In that you have a tr with a structural directive and then attribute directive to display the raw, and this is what you get if you do it like that. So this is a very basic example here. We actually can I think move forward to the second one, which is a little bit more exciting. There are custom templates here, and there are also sorting, so let's try it out. Okay, so let's take a look at the TypeScript code first. We have columns like we had before. We also have actions. It's another column that we don't have in our object here. It's not a key of user. And we have an array of objects that we will be displaying. We also have a remove function here, which we will try out. Something went wrong with this example, so let's just try it out here. We gotta look into that later. So we checked out the TypeScript part, so let's see at the less. Actually, we didn't cover less here because it's just with 100% for the table, so it stretches. And in our next example, we have a little bit more styling going on. So let's have a look. First, we need to remove borders around the cells and only leave the vertical ones. Due to some internal implementation, we don't really have a way to change the borders with a CSS border property. We don't want them to overlap when they are editable, and if you want, we could check out the source code, but how we can change it is we can control a border color instead of border itself. So you see in our TD and TH elements here, I've added white space no wrap, so it doesn't wrap, but it can if you want. And we changed the border color to transparent and only set the right border color to our default border color variable, which is toBase04. And in the last child, we remove the right border and make it transparent again, so it doesn't show up. And inside our tbody, we also set a border color to transparent, and that is to make all our borders disappear and only leave the vertical ones that we've set here. We also changed the background color of TR elements, but not really the TR, but TDs inside them, because otherwise it's not really possible to style, because our TD elements have the white background by default, so when they are sticky, they cover the cells underneath them, so you have to change background on the TD element itself. And then there are some custom styles for button that disappears unless you hover or focus the raw, which is an important part for accessibility. Some people just make action elements appear on hover, like you see the button here. But this is something that only the mouse users will be able to interact with. This is definitely not a touch-friendly interface, so it's a desktop interface. You need to think separately on the mobile devices. But if you have some user that only uses a keyboard, you need to use the focus within rule that you saw. So we could click tab and navigate to a raw, and you see the button appears here, and you can focus it with keyboard and press enter to remove that raw. And that the code that removes it is pretty straightforward. It's just a callback which filters the user's array. As you might imagine, I think I talked about that before, we always use immutable data, so it's a read-only array. We have to reassign it completely, and the interface is read-only as well. I'm a strong advocate for immutability in Angular because I love on push, and it's really hard to do with if you mutate data. So let's take a look at the HTML and how we can lay out this example. We saw TypeScript and styles already. So we have the table and the table directive. We pass columns here, and then in a th group we have something new, which is a structural directive to head, and we pass the name of column that we wanted to display for, similar to the cells that we were doing before. And this structural directives enables sorting here. So we have a attribute directive as well, which takes care of the styles. And here you see that in tags and in actions we pass sorter null, so we don't want to sort by those tables, those columns. We don't want to sort by actions or tags, but the others are sortable by default. And the default sorter is alphanumeric, so it can sort strings, numbers, and also it can sort our TUI class for dates. That not sure if it's there in the third example, but we can take a look. So what this makes those headers focusable. You see I hover over them and the arrows shows up. You can click it and it would sort the column, and we can use keyboard to navigate it as well and click enter to change the sorting. This is the actual button, native button, so it should be accessible. And you see the focus is visible when you navigate with keyboard, and when you click it with mouse it's not visible, and when you start using keyboard it appears. It's a really neat CSS feature called Focus Visible, which finally shipped to Chrome, and I think it was available in Firefox for a while. So let's go back to the HTML and see what we can do there. Then we have a t-body and pass data like before. Then we have a raw, and we iterate over our items, but what we have here as well is index. You could easily get the index of item using user's index of, but this particular index is the index inside a sorted array. So you see that it always shows numbers 1, 2, 3, and etc. When you sort it, you get this index remain the same. So if you want to, for example, remove or add a table raw underneath some item inside a sorted array, you can try to do that with index. Not sure if it's really needed for somebody, but if you want, otherwise you would not be able to get this data, so this is there in the context for you to use. So next we have our structural directives for cells, and we had a TUI attribute directive as before. We have a link, native link, which we pass values to if it's available. So you saw some rows did not have the email there, and we have some custom styles here going on. We had a div element with an indicator for status, which is just made with styles here. For this example, we have a TUI tag going over a loop with autocaller enabled, and we also have actions, which does not have any label there. It's see, it's an empty th, and inside that actions we have a button to remove the row, but you can have any actions there you want. This is how you add column that is not present in data object that you pass in users here. So this example is a little bit more exciting, as you can see. Do you have any questions? in
Yeah,
chat so
there are a
far?
couple of questions.
Yeah, let's take a look.
Now, there is a comment about this feature is super nice, and is it okay to use material with TUI?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely okay to mix libraries if you want. Just be careful with bundle size. I can tell that Taiga UI is very tree shakeable, so if you use only some parts of it, you will not get your bundle bloated. I cannot be sure about material or other libraries, so just be careful with that. And there's nothing in particular forcing you to use only Taiga here. The only thing is if you want to use drop downs, dialogues, etc. So you have to really add a TUI root element that I've talked before. And if you saw that our examples, they open up with TUI root added to the template. I'm sorry, I think it didn't save. So the only thing with Taiga is that you are required to wrap your application inside the TUI root element, because it registers some of our custom event plugins that we have. You see this one, this element. Let me just maximize it a little bit. And it also has, it lays down all the portals that we use for drop downs, hints, dialogues. I think I covered that with an article before. Maybe Roman can send a link to it in
Which
chat.
one?
The article about portals and why we have to
Yeah,
use
sure.
the TUI root element. And otherwise you can just grab some parts of Taiga and put it there. So in particular tables are only dependent on our custom mapper pipe, which is a very tiny one from CDK, and the SVG icon that we have.
Sorry,
The SVG
The
icon
wrong
for
link.
the arrow.
I sent the link. Haber link.
Yeah, it's a Russian version of the article.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Roman will send an English one too. So the SVG elements for the arrows in sort and in collapsible bodies, these are only two dependencies from other Taiga sections, so table is pretty lightweight. If you actually want, we can take a look at the source code. It's very neat and short. That's what we try to achieve. We always feel with Roman that if you have written a lot of code, you probably done something wrong. Most of those things can be broken into separate blocks with small code pieces, and if you write your code declaratively, which I strongly recommend, you often do not have big functions doing a lot of processing because you declare how your components behave. So if there are no more questions, let's...
There is a question in Russian about хочу такое худи, and I'll answer it in the chat.
All right. So Roman wrote in chat that we've added merch to our channel, some t-shirts with our logos and some hoodies and some angry jokes on t-shirts, so you can check it out. Link is in the description of the video. So let's switch to the third example, which is the most complex one, and let's take a look at the styles first. So in styles, there's not much going on. I have a scroll bar here, so it scrolls, and we can take a look at the HTML, which is our TUI scroll bar with hidden true, so we don't have any bars to scroll, just for the demo purposes. And you see here I've added a directive called WA, which stands for Web API intersection root. It's our own project called Web APIs for Angular and GWeb APIs. We have a lot of packages, and this particular one is about intersection observer, and it goes with Taiga UI. It's a dependency of it, and this directive shows that we are going to watch for intersections with this particular element. And inside table we have directives that are watching for it to apply the shadow that you saw when the header gets stuck. So let's take a look at the last. We basically just set the max height for our scroll bar, so if we collapse all the table, it gets shorter, and if we expand it, it grows, but to a certain extent, and then it starts to scroll. And we also have a number, which is a class for number columns, and we apply a text align right and flex direction row reverse so that our icon for sorting gets to the other side. Let's take a look at that. It's really a cosmetic one, depends on you. So you see price, the arrow is on the left and the text is aligned to the right, as well as the text inside the input. And in our text columns, like this one, the text is on the left, and yeah, here in units the arrow is on the right. So this is what you do if you want to switch that. Let's increase the scale a little bit because it's really small for screen sharing, and now it's too big. Yeah, I think that's a little bit better, like that. Yeah, okay, so this is how you switch the direction of the number columns. I know a lot of people prefer numbers aligned to the right, and this is part of our design guidelines, so that's why we implemented that on inputs in table. And then there's a first and second classes. One defines the width and the second defines left. That is because we have two columns sticky on the left, and we need to enforce that so we know where to become sticky for the second column. And we also have a select with minimum width of 100, so it shows up right. Let's take a look at the preview again to know that. So there's two columns here, and they're both sticky, and we have to know where this second column becomes sticky. That's why we hard code the width of the first column. So you see there's a lot of going on here. There are call spanning in the header. There is a row spanning here as well, and you see this one is a sortable column name, this one is sortable, this one is plain text. And in our table body we have call spans as well, and we have multiple table bodies. So let's take a look at the HTML, and first let's take a look at the TypeScript because it's smaller. So there's an interface for item. We have options update on blur because we don't want to update our controls immediately. They would retrigger the table redraw. So let's see how it's done. We have total here, and let's say we want to increase the quantity of sheds to 3. It didn't update, but when we leave the cell, it gets recalculated. That's what you can do with ng model options update on blur. It also is available for reactive forms if you prefer those. We also have validation here, which is min price. So let's take a look how it looks like. And here this item is too cheap, so when we focus it and blur, so it gets touched, we see that it become invalid. You see the red background here, and if we focus it, we see a red border and a little red triangle here. So this is all made automatically by dependency injections, and you don't have to customize it any way. You just put our regular form components here, and they become those white borderless without any border radius. So we'll take a look at them later. So TypeScript, let's go back to it. We have an array of Python's items and Star Wars items. We have columns here, and we have a total sorter, which is a sorter for our computed column. It's a TUI comparator. It's basically just a type for what you pass into a native array sort function. It gets item A and item B, and it has to return either -1, 0, or 1. And we have a default sort here. This is a function that you import from a table add-on, like that. And in this case, we need to multiply price and quantity to get the actual value of the row. And there's also get total, which multiplies those. And there's some value change, which updates the arrays, and that's it. And the meat goes into the template, so let's take a look at that. So I already spoke about scroll bar. So let's take a look. We have a table with size L. There's actually 3 different sizes for the table, which is S, M and L. It is the same as for our input controls, so it's 40 pixels, 44 and 56. We pass columns again, and there's a th directive on t head element, and inside that we have this time two different rows, tr1 and tr2, and inside the second one we only have quantity and units, because if we take a look at the HTML, at the preview, we see that only those two headers are actually in the second row. This one is in the first one, and this one is in the first one as well, but it row spans to the second row. And we can use native attributes to do that. You see, we had a row span here. We say that we don't want to sort by name, and we also add an attribute called sticky, the input sticky true. This is to make the column sticky when we scroll horizontally. If you want your header be sticky, all you need to do is add to head directive to the t head. Without this directive, the header is not sticky, but it's all styled properly, so we don't really have to use that. But if you want it to be sticky, then you add this directive and it works automatically. So we have a class that we discussed before. We have some non-breakable spaces here. And here we have a call span on purchase, so that we have it span over quantity and price, I believe. Let's take a look again at the preview. Yes, it's quantity and units. So this one, it goes in the order of quantity in our array of columns. So that's why we use it here. And we add call span 2. And then we have an empty unit container, because we don't want that to appear here, because we have a call span already. So this next column is taken. So we only add a empty ng container here. And then we have a date, which is also row span for 2, and the total, which is also row span. So this is how you define multiple rows in your t head. So I think it's pretty straightforward. The only thing that might feel strange is this one, but you need to be able to define that you want to skip some columns, otherwise you would get them displayed in plain text like we saw before in the first example. Then we get t body, and we have a heading input here. It can be a string, or it can be a template or a component, which is a polymorphous input that we use all the time in Taiga UI. So in the second example here, we see we pass a template just to try it out, and in the template we have some text, and we have a SVG icon of a star just to try that template's work. So let's go back. We can just take a look at the first table body. Second table body is exactly the same. So if you pass heading, then you have this collapsible block, the gray block that you can click, and it would collapse the body. If you do not pass it here, you just get all the rows like we saw in previous examples. So all you have to do to make it collapsible is pass some heading here. Then we have a to row, and since we have access to our native th and td elements, we can use native call span properties here. In this example, we just try and check the price. This is a really stupid example probably, because it's just a random one. In real life you would not do that, because this value can change. But here you can see how you can just change those call spans based on the item that you are currently displaying. And you see this time we are using th, which is inside a t body, and has a to td directive here, which might seem a little counterintuitive because it's not a td but it's a th. But that's how you get the raw headers to stick. And you see that in our example, when you scroll horizontally, these items, they get stuck because they are sticky. And if we take a look at the HTML of those. So let's try it out. This is our hold on, it's the wrong one. So this is our role. Let's scroll it back, and inside of it we see that we have a th, and because hold on a bit, because it's th and not a td, it gets sticky positioning from our built-in styles. I actually thought that it also gets the scope raw here, but I think it's not built in. We would definitely build that in for accessibility purposes, so that any accessive technologists know that this is not just a simple cell, but but a header for this entire row. So let's dive back into HTML and see how it's done. So we are back into t-body. We change the call span, like I said, and we've just put our inputs here. And because of dependency injection, they get their appearance from the table, and all the styles are applied properly. You do not have any border radius, box shadows that you get on inputs if you use them outside of the table. And also all the paddings are removed from the cell, so those inputs, they take up the whole space here. And this is another case where we have ngIf for our th, because like if you remember previously, we had a call span here, conditional one, and sometimes this cell takes up 2 columns, sometimes it takes 1. This should probably be 1, not 0. Some minor mistake. 0 is not applicable, so it switches back to 1. And you see that in cases where we have call span on the previous column, we just do not show the second table. It's an empty container here. And then we have quantity, which we use input count for. And inside units we have toSelect, which also works with table. I think all of our inputs work like that. Maybe text array is a little bit dodgy. I'm not sure if it works with tables, because it's multi-line and it's a bit hard to style, but I think might work. We just need to stuck it in and give it a shot. And in total, we do the same thing as we did in the first example. We format the number. So this is it. This is actually the whole API. There can be a lot more examples digging into some particular things here, like filtering table, reordering columns, and search inside the table. And we would add those examples later on. But I think that covers all the functionality that we have now. Remember, this is the first release with what we got. If you have any features that you want to be added to the table, you can create a feature request in the GitHub. If you have some questions on how to do particular thing, you can start a discussion. If you don't know how to do something, you can also create a Stack Blitz question. Stack Overflow question. Maybe send me a link and I can answer it. If you want to ask something, you can always contact me or Roman over Twitter or in any other form that you feel suitable for you, maybe Telegram, emailing. So
there is a couple of
I think that's all I
questions.
wanted to show. Let's take a look at the questions now.
Yeah.
So how would someone go about implementing virtual scrolling, lazy loading, pagination, etc.? So virtual scroll wouldn't work probably because it's a native table. It's pretty hard to implement virtual scrolling here. I need to give it a shot with Material CDK. But if you want to use pagination, we have a component for that. I think the design will change a little bit because it's not the final version. It's called table pagination, and inside it you can show how many pages you have, how many lines per page you want to show, and you can go over pages here. And like I said, this is a good thing to make another example inside the table, so how you can use that. And we would add that in the future when we finalize the design for this component. But you can use it right now. might be a little bit tricky because you don't know how, but you can give it a shot. And later on we would add an example on that. And then in terms of virtual scroll, I'm not sure yet if you can use it with virtual scrolling, but we need to try. Any other questions there?
Yeah, there is.
It's not an unclear behavior, it's actually a cell, and so it just applies to both TD and TH. The behavior is the same except for the sticky class that's applied automatically, because if you have a column that acts as a header for an entire row, and if you scroll horizontally, you would probably want it to stick automatically. If you don't want to, you can always override the default styles there. And I don't think it's a bad practice because a lot of the functionalities here is the same, and you could create different selectors but apply the same directive, but I think it only makes it harder for you to understand, because it's in the end it's still a cell. Like we saw, it has an input there. I'm on a different page. It is a cell which you can edit. We can try something else and write something else here. So the only thing about it is because it acts as a header for entire row, it gets sticky when you scroll. So I don't think that there should be a different name for it, because all the other functionalities are borrowed from the cell directive. The TUI head directive could be called sticky, like you said, but it would be not as intuitive because you wouldn't know where to put that. This name could confuse people because they might think that they can use it on any element to make it sticky, and we could call it TUI head sticky, but I think that's just a long name because it's just TUI head that you put on native T head, and I think it goes naturally. It wouldn't make anything bad if you add it to a basic table like we did before, that do not get sticky. You see that it works perfectly well. It just doesn't it doesn't get stuck because there is no scrolling on the parent container. So any other questions here? And sorter too. Yes, the sorter goes from the header directive on a TH inside the inside T head. So it's a separate directive called TUI head. In this case, they're actually named differently because they do different things. TUI head enables sorting, and TUI cell, it's just a template for a particular cell in a column. So you have to apply both attribute and structural directive here, because you cannot style things with structural directives, and you can do that with a component that is selector here. But you can put this structural directive on some container above and make some changes there if you want. This is actually what you can do with a TUI row. So let's try this example here. That's why these are different directives, really, because you can use them separately. For example, if you want to add some extra line on each row, let's just try it out. So let's say we have this template here. This is a very first example that we saw. Let's just toggle Zen mode so there's less stuff on screen. We can move that to a ng container here. I actually didn't try that, so maybe it wouldn't work. Let's give it a shot and put another tr here. Inside we can have a td call span 2, and maybe we want to write some data on this container here, like that, like that, and like that. You see we have a data here that we could style like we want. Maybe we can use a 2etd here, so it applies the styles and borders like that. And you can maybe apply different styles here, remove vertical padding and make minimal height of 0, and add some expandable content that you can show when you click on the raw. So there's really a lot of things you can do with this API here. You just need to get a little grasp on it, on how it works, and then there's a lot of freedom here to customize the tables the way you want. That's why we want to add more examples to this page to show all different use cases that you can cover with that. As for sorting, I think the question was about sorting. Not sure what is confusing there. Like I said, the sorting is a attribute of a column, and if you apply the column directive, which is a TUI head, then you can add sorting. You see here we don't have any sorting because we don't have that directive. Any more questions?
No.
Okay, so I think that's it for the tables. I hope you like that and find it useful. If you have any troubles or issues, feel free to contact us. And I think that's all. If you want, we can go over the source code, but I think there's not much there to see really, because it's really simple. Table directive. This is how it's organized. There's a folder called table inside our add-on table. Maybe it's a little bit small to see. And inside we have a directives, some providers, and some components like tbody. The styles here are pretty simple. There's a polymorphous outlet that we use for content showing. There's an icon. And there are simple ng containers, so we don't introduce any extra tags into the layout. It's just basic tr and tds. And all our components are very simple. They don't have much logic inside. Inside the tbody we only have a function that creates context, so it doesn't recreate it on change detection. We use the mapper pipe to prevent extra recalculations, and all of those stuff are processed with the dependency injection. We inject table in our directives, and we know what to do with the columns and things like that. Most of those columns, they have just like one or two, those components have one or two lines of functions. Pretty simple. Write in chat if you want me to go over this thing, or if it's not interesting. I'll just end the live stream now.
No questions.
All right, so thank you guys for watching. Feel free to contact us, and happy using the new table feature. So bye bye everyone.